It's the day in the year that the world has used the resources that it can renew. So technically, we are running in overtime. And if you look to the last couple of years, we've actually run more and more in overtime, actually putting a lot of our resource use at the expense of future generations. We use more resources today in the world than the world actually can renew on an annual basis. And unfortunately, our industry is part of that usage. As many scientific studies about pollutions of different industries, whether it's the oil industry, agriculture, but it's clear that there's 4 or 5 industries globally that actually produce a lot of the pollution as well as the resource demand on the world. And our value chain is one of them. And we better start acting in driving this in a different direction, because if we don't do it ourselves, someone will unfortunately do it for us. Let me ask you a second question. So today in the US, the average price of a pair of jeans is about $100. More or less, yeah? Depends on the brand, but it's more or less what it is. What should that price actually be if we factor the cost in, the full cost of the resource that I used? What should that price actually be? Anyone who has an idea? No one? Actually, it should be about $30 per pair of jeans more. If we would fully factor in the environmental cost, if we would fully factor in the social cost. You can actually debate the science, but there's quite some institutes that are spending quite some time on determining this. And the Impact Institute, together with the ABN AMRO Bank, has done this for the textile chain. That actually means that if we don't factor that cost into what the consumer in the US or in Europe pays today, we actually pass that bill on to our future generations. If we actually don't charge for this, we pass that bill on to our kids. And that's probably something that we jointly have the responsibility to change. Now, change will not happen overnight. It's clear. This is not revolution, but it's evolution neither. We need to move this needle quite fast and avoid that our kids become the victims of choices I, as a CEO, have made. Now, we work, of course, in a very demanding environment, and I'm not saying that cost is not important. Cost competitiveness is extremely important. But the future is not about cost alone, and certainly not if that cost is achieved by bypassing laws or by pushing too hard on our environmental resources. There's always someone who wants to do it cheaper, but we should not be led by that. We should be led by creating value and making sure that there's an economic benefit in everything we do. So there is a need for change. We need to continuously work the value chain of the textile industry to create an economic benefit for its consumers. And if we don't do that ourselves, we have a huge opportunity with growing markets. And people may say, yeah, but we get competition from other countries. I actually think India is well positioned with its integral system to be competitive worldwide. But we need to make also sure that whilst, let's say, achieving superior products, that we drive this not at the expense of, for example, the environment. If we don't do it ourselves, it will be done for us. And let me just stress that point, because brands are increasingly asking for transparency, not only of their suppliers, but of their suppliers' suppliers. There's increasingly systems that will measure everything. In China, there's today a NGO that is completely focusing on every violations at mill level. Not only, let's say, environmental, social, but even small fines, they report. And they actually try to influence the brands to work with those mills that don't have those kind of tainted reports. In the next 5 years, this transparency will redesign and redefine the value chain. And we can either wait for it or we can actually act and be proactive on it. And proactive means orchestrating the value chain across all the steps, making sure that both downstream as well as upstream, you work with integral systems with your suppliers, and you make sure you exclude risk and you exclude any non-sustainable practices in your value chain. It is a value chain initiative. If you don't orchestrate your value chain like that within the next 5 years, you'll be left behind. People, brands, final consumer wants to have that total transparency, and the consumer is actually getting quite powerful. You've seen a little girl from 16 years old in Sweden actually mobilizing the world around climate change. And because of current social media, they get the report, they get the attention. It's therefore that we need to drive a value chain initiative, which basically means that the chain needs to work together, but that we don't look at the individual parts, but that we look at optimizing the total value chain, much more than we do today, by integrating our systems, by driving, let's say, our joint interest. Of course, suppliers like Archroma, and Archroma being the leading innovator in this industry, have their role to play as well. 6 years ago, when we bought this business from Clariant, and we started founding a new direction, it was all anchored in sustainability. It was in challenging the status quo, in a deep belief that we can make this industry sustainable, and also making sure that sustainability and economics are not considered mutually exclusive. Actually, you realize that when we increase the productivity of the value chain of our customers, that if we improve the productivity of all natural resources, that it drives economic benefits. And that's how we center our innovation. Our innovation is completely centered around driving sustainability on 3 layers, but deriving economic benefit from it. First layer is, of course, our own facilities. Second is the full value chain. And third, particularly, how can we drive natural resource efficiency for our customers. We call that the Archroma way, and it's based on the principle that everything we do needs to be safe, everything we do around it needs to be natural resource efficiency enhancing. And we do that in ways that we actually also make that quite graphical for our customers, that we typically design system solutions that drive a reduction of water usage, energy usage, and other natural resources, and as a consequence drive a lower cost per square meter of produced textiles. So being sustainable and creating a lower delivered cost is not mutually exclusive, it's actually enhancing. We do that also by looking to other sources. And one of the sources is natural waste, natural agricultural waste. Earth colors, a range of natural dyes made from agricultural waste, has been awarded multiple times and is used by many players in industry to actually give cotton a natural dyeing. But also on the indigo side, indigo contains aniline, of course, as a source of the reaction, and aniline is a restricted substance and a scale 1 aquatic polluter. And we worked on synthetic indigo, but then without aniline, which has been launched last year, widely used. And every little step in innovation comes also with a sustainability advantage, an economic advantage. Major brands pick up on that. These are some of the brands that use these systems and essentially drive economic and sustainable benefits at the same time. So the innovation and the sustainability go hand in hand. The solutions are out there. Key thing is to drive it through the value chain, to work together with your suppliers, with your customers, and choose consciously to change the industry, to change our value chain into a more sustainable one. Today, we're responsible for about 8 or 9% of the natural resources worldwide, and probably something like 15% of the pollution worldwide. And it's our task, including, and I mean the whole textile value chain, including its suppliers, to drive that downwards. With that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thank you.